It was always hard for me to admit if somebody hurt my feelings or to have those conversations, because a lot of it goes back to our family dynamics growing up. And I grew up in a big family, and I was the fourth child in a family of 5 kids. And so I laugh. I'm like, I kind of grew up scrappy, and my sisters and I would get in these big
Totally.
fights. And I remember we didn't hear anything about repair. There was no repairing. We never apologized. We just didn't speak for 3 days. And then when we started speaking again, it was assumed that the fight was over. And so what happens is I look back, I realize I brought that into my parenting, and I did not learn that. I did not learn how to apologize or look at myself or own up to my own mistakes. And it is hard to do that. But I think that's important. But then you said sometimes, somebody hurts your feelings. And so what the other side of that was, like, if somebody hurt my feelings, I was not able to say it. I was not able to express it to them. But then it would come out in passive aggressive ways, and it would hurt the relationship. So, like, one story, I was telling my girls this recently, that one story that comes to mind was when I was pregnant with my first child. I had another friend who was pregnant too. And we had this sweet, awesome friend group, and they wanted to take us to dinner one night. And so we went to dinner. We felt very loved, very celebrated. And then we went home. Well, later that night, my other friend who was pregnant called me, and she's like, "Hey, do you know that they dropped us off and they all went out together without us?" And I was like, "No, I didn't know that." And we were both hurt because they didn't mention anything about it, but they wanted to
Yeah.
go out and have more fun, have a few more drinks without their pregnant friends. And so I
Uh,
was really hurt. And so it kind of undid the celebration that I felt like that night. And so and so I realized, so the next day I kind of prayed about it, and I realized I was going to say something. I was like, I need to learn this skill. I'm going to say something to my friend that hurt my feelings. And I think I'm justified in that hurt my feelings. And so I wasn't going to be like, "Oh, I can't believe y'all did this." I wasn't doing it in anger. I called her the next day, and I was so nervous because I was not used to this skill I was trying to build. But I told her, I was like, "Hey, I heard that, this happened last night, and I just want to let you know it just hurt my feelings. I felt it just makes me, I don't know how it made me feel, but I was like, it just hurt my feelings." And she's like, "I'm sorry." And she's like, "It was wrong. We shouldn't have done that." And there was another girl in the group that wanted to go out, and it was her idea, and she kind of had gone along with it. And so I was so glad that I mentioned it to her, because, without her telling me that, I had all these narratives in my head, like they don't like us, or they're talking about us behind our back. And there's so many stories we can tell ourselves when we don't know the facts. And so it gave my friend a chance to apologize and to share the truth of what really happened. And anyway, I think that was just such a good example. It was a good example for me to be like, sometimes it really can make your friendship stronger if you can go back and let them know
and
that.
work through that conflict and repair rather than just like piecing out and moving on. The narratives we build in our head when we don't even have the full scope or picture of what's going on. Like, I definitely know I've struggled with this and maybe still do to this day, but like these narratives we kind of paint in our head instead of like talking with someone and working through it, we'll like
Hmm.
paint this picture of like, this is what happened, even though it might not even actually be what happened. Um, I'm guessing, like, I know
Right.
you've worked through a lot of your challenges in motherhood. Just I love your honesty. I love, like, because so many of us are truly struggling with these things, but a lot of people won't share this journey because you might feel ashamed of certain aspects of the pain points in your life. But can you break down this idea around narratives that
Hmm.
we as moms, wives, friends paint in our heads and how they can actually be a major disservice to ourselves and our loved ones?
Yeah, one thing I see a lot, and I really struggle with this, and I think it happens especially as kids become teenagers and they start pulling away, or they might start fighting back or pushing back a little bit, is just that sense of not feeling appreciated and not feeling loved. And especially when you've been all into motherhood, like I was, for years, you're giving, you're doing all these things, and you pretty much get it back when they're little. It's reciprocated. And then what happened as my kids grew up, I remember there was one night that I had like two of them that were mad at me, and I knew I was doing the right thing, but they were mad at me. And so I had the narrative in my head, like, they hate me, I'm a terrible mom. I feel like I'm doing the right thing, but they don't like me, and I feel like I'm working so hard and I've sacrificed so much, and it's not appreciated. And it's really easy to wallow in that narrative. And I had a neighborhood Bible study that I was supposed to go to, and I did not feel like going, but I was like, I just need to get out of the house, and so I'm going tonight. And this neighborhood Bible study, it was really a random mix of people. There were some moms that were older than me, some moms that were younger than me. And I don't even remember the topic that night, but it was for moms. And I just remember feeling like such a sense of peace and love with all of those moms. And again, I just thought, God is so good. Like this is exactly what my heart needed tonight. Because even though I'm not, the conversation's not centered on me, I just felt loved in that room. And it was just something that I needed, a love and some joy that was coming into my life that was apart from my family. So that was just a real lesson for me, is that I think that we have got to find that as moms, as we've got to find those other sources of joy. And first and foremost, that's why our faith is so important. And there are so many nights, you might be feeling unloved or unappreciated, but just that's the time to just really sit with the Lord and say, God, just I know you love me. Just remind me of how much you love me. And to sit and read the Bible and remember that what we tell our children, what's true for them, that it's equally true for us, that even when we might not feel loved by our family or appreciated, that he does love us. But I think when we're not doing that, then that's when sometimes we start to withhold love from our children, because we don't feel appreciated and we're angry and we're kind of closing off. And I'm just a big believer that for us to keep loving them and to keep doing that, and not be dictated by their moods and their emotions, which can be very fickle. And, they have things going on that we don't even know about. We've got to be getting joy and peace and these other things from other people, and also just from our faith. And that just is really going to be the foundation that we stand on, so that whether our child is hugging us today or, giving us a little attitude, it's not going to change the way that we love them. We can love them regardless of whether they're loving us back today. But I think that's important, because otherwise those narratives in our head can just really go astray and lead us down some really dark roads.